No one noticed the dog drowning, except a 3-year-old baby girl. What happened next was a miracle. A little girl. A silent scream. One simple act of kindness that changes everything. This is more than a rescue. It's a story about love, bravery, and what it means to be truly human. Get ready to be moved. Like, share, and subscribe for this unforgettable journey. It was supposed to be just another Sunday, warm sun, busy park, tired parents sipping coffee as their children played near the lake. Laughter echoed across the water. Phones were out. Conversations were buzzing. But just beneath that calm surface, something was fighting. Something was drowning. A dog, large, exhausted, tangled in reeds and wire, was slipping under. Not barking. Not growling. Just gasping. No one noticed. No one looked up. Except her. 3-year-old Ella, barefoot in the grass, holding her toy boat, suddenly froze. Her head tilted. Her eyes narrowed. She walked toward the lake. Bonk. Then she screamed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it pierced the calm like a blade. Because she saw what no one else did. And what happened next would not just save a life. It would change the town forever. It was one of those warm, lazy afternoons that made everything feel slower, softer. The lakeside park, tucked on the edge of a quiet town, was alive with the gentle hum of life. Parents chatting under trees, toddlers chasing bubbles, teenagers scrolling on benches. The lake, broad and still, reflected the soft blue sky above like a mirror. Its surface barely rippled. It was a Sunday. It was safe. It was peaceful. Or so everyone believed. 3-year-old Ella wandered slightly away from the picnic blanket her mother had laid out beneath an old oak. Her tiny hands held a worn-out toy boat with peeling red paint. She toddled toward the edge of the water, eyes wide, lips pressed together in focus. No one noticed her slip away. Her mother, Olivia, had turned to grab juice boxes from the cooler. Around her, adults were absorbed in conversation, in phones, in each other. Then, in the silence between bird songs and laughter, came a sound that didn't belong. A faint splash. Not the joyful kind children make with their feet. Not the careless plop of a tossed pebble. This one was heavier, desperate. It went unnoticed by everyone. Everyone except Ella. She stopped just before the grass gave way to the muddy bank. Her boat dropped from her hand into the reeds. Her eyes locked on something in the water. It wasn't clear, more like a shadow shifting, struggling. She tilted her head, stepping forward, squinting at the shimmering distance. There it was again. A ripple. Then a weak splash. And then ice. Just barely above the water, reflecting light like wet marbles, wide, terrified. Something was out there. Something alive. Something drowning. Ella didn't scream at first. She simply pointed, her tiny arms stretching out like a warning flag. She looked back toward her mother, her voice catching in her throat. Then she tried again, louder this time. "Mama," she called, but Olivia didn't hear her over the laughter of a nearby family. The dog in the water thrashed once more, too weak to fight the weight dragging it down. Muddied reeds wrapped around its body like seaweed. Its snout dipped, then rose, gasping. A wheeze. Another splash. A silent plea no one heard, except her. Ella's next scream tore through the air, high and shrill, not like a tantrum but like fear, like alarm. Heads turned. Mothers stood. Olivia dropped the juice boxes and ran, heart hammering. She found her daughter standing at the edge, arms shaking, pointing out across the lake. "There!" Ella cried, not knowing the word for what she saw, only that it was wrong. Olivia followed her daughter's finger, and for a moment saw nothing. Then she spotted it, the barely there movement in the water. A dark shape. A paw reaching. A nose surfacing and sinking again. Her breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. People began gathering behind them. Some shaded their eyes, squinting. Others mumbled. A man stepped forward, uncertain. "Is that a dog?" he asked aloud. Someone else said, "Maybe it's a log." But then they all heard it. A sound that wasn't human, that wasn't wind. A cry. A final wet gasp. Without a second thought, Olivia kicked off her sandals, threw down her phone, and charged into the water. The crowd gasped. Ella watched, unmoving, her eyes never leaving the struggling shadow in the lake. The cold water bit Olivia's legs as she waded in waist-deep, then chest-deep. The dog was farther than he looked, drifting, pushed by the slow current. Olivia's limbs ached with each stroke, but she pushed on. She could see now the tangled body of a German shepherd, barely holding its head above water, its legs bound by something slick and green. Reeds? She wasn't sure. His chest heaved, then stopped. She reached him just as he slipped under. Grabbing a handful of soaked fur, Olivia yanked the dog upward, struggling to keep both of them afloat. He was heavy, almost lifeless. The water fought her. Her own breath grew short, but she didn't stop. She wrapped her arm around his chest and kicked hard, dragging them back toward shore. Hands reached into the water. Someone helped pull the dog from her arms. Another man helped Olivia onto the muddy bank. The crowd parted. Olivia collapsed to her knees, coughing, shaking, drenched and gasping. The dog lay motionless. His fur was coated in algae, his paws curled tight. His tongue lolled to the side. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ella, tiny and trembling, stepped forward. She crouched beside the dog, her hand barely big enough to touch his paw. She whispered something no one could hear. And then, the faintest flick of an ear. A twitch in the leg. The crowd leaned in. He was alive. Barely, but alive. And in that moment, no one cared about the wet clothes, the disrupted picnic, or the crowd that had gathered. All they saw was a little girl who noticed what no one else did. A little girl who saw a soul sinking and screamed it back to the surface. At first, Ella's voice was nothing more than background noise, soft, scattered syllables drifting across the lawn like wind through leaves. Parents continued talking, their laughter rising with the hum of the lakeside breeze. Toddlers tumbled in the grass, chasing butterflies they'd never catch. Phones were up, snacks were out, and the world spun with a comfortable rhythm no one questioned. But Ella wasn't playing. Her little hands were balled into fists at her sides, and her eyes, wide, alarmed, unblinking, stared toward the lake's edge. She stood so still that even the ducks, bobbing lazily on the water, didn't notice her. Then she screamed. It wasn't the kind of shriek that toddlers usually gave, the kind that demanded cookies or cartoons. This sound came from somewhere deeper. It sliced through the noise around her like glass through silk. Olivia, still sitting by the cooler, barely had time to register her daughter's voice before it came again, louder, more urgent. "Mama!" Ella cried, her tiny finger jabbing forward. "Mama, look!" Olivia turned. Confusion flickered across her face as she squinted in the direction Ella was pointing. "What is it, baby?" she asked, rising to her feet, brushing crumbs from her jeans. "Did you see a duck?" But Ella wasn't laughing or bouncing. She looked stricken, as though she were watching something terrible unfold and couldn't stop it. People nearby began to glance over. Some paused mid-bite. A woman holding a toddler muttered, "She's just being dramatic." Another chuckled, probably saw a frog. But Ella's cry wasn't stopping. In fact, it was growing, ragged and desperate now, each word pressed out like a plea. "Mama! Doggy!" Her voice cracked. Olivia jogged toward her, heart racing now, propelled not by what she saw, but by what she saw in Ella's face. Pure, unfiltered fear. She reached her daughter and dropped to a crouch. "What did you see?" she asked gently. Ella's hand flew out again toward the lake. That's when Olivia saw it. At first, it looked like a ripple. A gentle disturbance in the water near the tall reeds, maybe 20 feet from shore. Then a flash of something dark. A paw? A tail? A head. A dog's head. Muzzled. Straining. Sinking. "Oh my God," Olivia breathed. Time fractured. In the span of a second, her brain tried to make sense of it. Was it a trick of the light? A floating log? No, it moved again. Weakly. Slowly. Like a creature on the edge of its final breath. Its snout dipped beneath the surface. A splash followed. Then, nothing. She didn't think. She reacted. "Move!" she shouted to no one and everyone, pulling her phone from her pocket and tossing it to the ground. She slipped off her shoes as she ran. The crowd parted slightly, unsure of what they were seeing, their casual afternoon unraveling before them like a fraying thread. She hit the water fast, the cold shocking her lungs. With each step, the mud gripped her ankles like hands trying to pull her back. But she didn't stop. Ella was still on the bank, her voice hoarse now, shouting, "Mama, help him," over and over like a broken chant. The water grew deeper, chest high, then shoulder high. Olivia kicked off, swimming toward the dark shape now barely visible beneath the rippling surface. The current was slow but stubborn. The dog had drifted farther than she expected. Her arms burned, but she kept pushing. She reached him as he slipped under. Her hand closed around matted fur slick with algae and lake slime. The weight of him dragged her downward. He was big, bigger than she'd thought. Not just heavy with muscle, but soaked, dead weight, tangled in reeds. She grabbed tighter, struggling to loop her arm under his front legs, careful not to pull too hard. He didn't resist. He couldn't. "Help!" someone yelled from the shore. She heard it faintly, muffled by the wind and water. A man ran toward the lake, but Olivia was already turning, her limbs aching as she kicked and pulled. For every foot she gained, the water fought back. She emerged near the shore, gasping, the dog half floating in her grip. A pair of hands reached into the water and took him from her arms. Others helped her up, coughing, shaking, every inch of her soaked and scraped. Around her, faces blurred together, wide eyes, open mouths, stunned silence. The dog lay on the bank like a rag doll, legs twisted, fur clumped. His chest wasn't rising. "Somebody call a vet," someone yelled. A teenage boy dropped to his knees and began pumping on the dog's chest the way he'd seen on TV. Olivia knelt beside him, pressing gently behind the ribs. A wet gasp came from the dog's throat. Then a cough. Another. Water dribbled from his muzzle. One eye fluttered open, cloudy and unfocused. A breath. He was alive. People gasped. A few clapped. Some backed away. Olivia leaned forward, brushing the wet fur from his face. She could see now, he wasn't just drowning. He'd been hurt. Thin scars crisscrossed his belly. His leg was swollen, maybe broken. A piece of rope hung from his collar, frayed and tangled. But then a small hand reached in. She knelt beside him, her face gentle and solemn. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just placed her palm against his soaked paw. The dog didn't flinch. And in that second, amid the noise, the chaos, the onlookers trying to capture a miracle on shaky phone cameras, something silent passed between them. Something no one else could feel. A connection. Fragile. Instant. Unshakable. Olivia sat back on her heels, tears mixing with lake water, watching her daughter and a dog neither of them knew, both shaking, both quiet, both brave in a way that had nothing to do with size or strength. She had cried out when no one else did. She had seen what others missed. And now, a life was saved, Not by luck, not by fate, but by a child's cry that refused to be ignored. For a moment, the lakeside felt frozen in time, not from cold, but from collective hesitation. People stood in clusters, their eyes fixed on the water as if unsure what they were really seeing. A dark shape thrashing near the reeds, limbs flailing weakly, snout bobbing in and out of the surface. Some gasped. Others murmured. But no one moved. A man in his 40s instinctively picked up a stick and tossed it toward the shape, as if the dog could chase it back like some normal, playful retriever. It landed with a useless splash, startling the already panicked animal. A woman covered her mouth and turned away. Another reached for her phone, dialing animal control with shaking hands. But the dog didn't have that kind of time. The lake had already claimed his strength. Every second was costing him breath. And then Olivia moved. Without a word, without a warning, she took 3 swift steps forward, kicked off her shoes mid-run, and sprinted straight into the lake. Her body cut through the stillness like a blade. Cold water swallowed her legs, but she didn't stop. She dove, arms reaching, her eyes locked on the drowning dog. He was farther than he looked, drifting outward as the current gently pulled him away like a secret. Behind her, voices shouted, "Wait, it's too deep. You need help." But she didn't hear them, not really. Her ears rang with the echo of Ella's screams, with the image of those terrified, clouded dog eyes begging to stay above the surface. The moment her head dipped beneath the water, the cold crushed her lungs. Her jeans dragged like anchors. Her arms burned with every stroke. But she pushed forward, fueled by something more than instinct, a primal need to reach him, to not let him go under again, to not let her daughter witness a life slip away. Closer now, she could see him, a large German shepherd, maybe 80 pounds, soaked to the bone, barely conscious. His back legs were wrapped in reeds and a strip of torn fabric that clung to him like a shackle. His muzzle dipped again. Olivia surged forward and grabbed hold of his thick, waterlogged fur. Her fingers sank into his coat, her grip slick with algae and silt. He didn't fight. He couldn't. His body was limp, a dead weight that shifted only with the motion of the lake. Olivia wrapped one arm around his chest and the other beneath his front legs, pulling with every ounce of strength she had. But the dog was tangled. The reeds pulled back. The current fought her. She kicked hard, but her legs thrashed uselessly, churning up mud and weeds. She needed air. Her head broke the surface with a gasp, water cascading down her face. "Help!" she shouted, but the shoreline felt miles away now. Behind her, a man waded into the lake, calling out, but the depth halted him quickly. She was alone. The dog's breathing was faint, shallow and uneven. Olivia could feel his chest rising and falling in strange, erratic patterns. Panic rose in her throat. "Not yet," she whispered to him. "Please, not yet." She gritted her teeth and dove again, yanking at the vines and fabric binding his legs. Her nails tore. Her fingers bled. But the knots began to loosen. Finally, the last thread snapped free. With one final burst, she kicked toward the shore, dragging the dog with her, water splashing wildly around them. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her lungs burned. But she could see the shoreline now, closer. Closer. Arms reached for her. She felt hands pull the dog from her grasp. Others grabbed her elbows, lifting her out of the lake, laying her on the grass. She collapsed beside the dog, coughing violently, spitting lake water onto the ground. Her body shook uncontrollably. Someone draped a jacket over her shoulders. Ella knelt beside her, eyes wide and wet with tears. The dog lay on his side, motionless. Water pooled beneath his body. His mouth hung open slightly, tongue limp. Olivia crawled closer, placing a trembling hand on his ribcage. For a second, she felt nothing. Then, a flutter. A faint thump beneath her palm. A heartbeat. Barely. "He's alive," she whispered, voice hoarse. People gathered around, a semicircle of silence and awe. No one took photos. No one spoke above a whisper. The only sound was the distant call of a bird overhead and the soft, wheezing breaths of the dog who had nearly died unseen. A man ran forward with a towel. Someone else fetched a blanket. An older woman arrived with a first aid kit from her car. The community, once frozen, had awakened, but it had taken the bravery of a toddler and the desperate plunge of a mother to shake them into motion. The dog, still barely clinging to consciousness, let out a quiet whimper as Ella leaned close to him. She didn't speak. She didn't touch him. She simply sat beside him, cross-legged, as if to say, "You're not alone." And as Olivia looked between her daughter and the creature they'd just dragged from death, her heart filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Not just fear or adrenaline, but purpose. Something had brought them to this lake today. Something had made Ella hear what no one else had. And now, lying beside this broken animal who had survived the water, she knew they weren't done yet. This wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood, not yet. But it had started with a race. And they had won. He lay there like a statue, cold and collapsed, his thick coat soaked and clinging to his ribs. The German shepherd's body stretched limply across the grass, mud streaking his fur, water pooling beneath his side. His chest didn't rise. His tongue drooped lifelessly out the side of his mouth. Around him, silence fell, the kind that feels heavy, uncomfortable, like nature itself was holding its breath. For all the effort, the struggle, the desperate fight to pull him from the lake, it now seemed like it might have been too late. Olivia knelt beside him, her heart hammering against her ribs, lungs still aching from the cold water. Her hands hovered over his side, trembling, searching for a sign, any sign, that he was still in there somewhere, that it had meant something, that her daughter's scream hadn't come seconds too late. But the dog remained still. Then a voice from the crowd, sharp and urgent, "I've got CPR training, move." A young man, no older than 20, stepped forward. He wore a faded red lifeguard hoodie, now soaked to his waist from helping pull Olivia ashore. Dropping to his knees, he positioned himself beside the dog, eyes darting. No breathing. No heartbeat. "Wait," came another voice, firmer, older. A woman, maybe in her 50s, pushed through the circle. Her name tag still clipped to her work lanyard. "Karen Arn. I'm a nurse. Let's do it together." "No one's ever taught me CPR for a dog," he admitted, panic in his voice. "Lungs are lungs," she replied, already positioning herself at the dog's head. Mouth closed, push through the nose. You compress the chest. Small bursts. It began, a surreal, desperate rhythm of pressure and breath. The lifeguard counted aloud as he pressed down on the dog's ribs. The nurse sealed her lips around the shepherd's snout, blowing gently. Over and over. Nothing. In the background, children clung to their parents, some crying softly. Ella stood just outside the circle, arms wrapped around her stuffed rabbit, face pale, eyes wide. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She just watched. The world had shrunk down to this one moment, this one being who had no name, no collar, no story, only a sliver of life hanging by a thread. More compressions. More breaths. Nothing. And then a twitch. A sudden, tiny jolt in the dog's hind leg. Karen stopped. "Did you see that?" The lifeguard froze. "Yeah, I did." Then a cough. A wet, ugly, sputtering cough that erupted from the shepherd's throat, spraying a stream of lake water from his mouth. His body convulsed once, then again. Another cough, more water. And then a low, raspy moan, like the groan of an engine starting after years of silence. "He's breathing," the nurse whispered. "He's actually breathing." The crowd gasped. Some cheered. A few clapped. One child squealed with joy. Olivia exhaled for what felt like the first time in minutes, tears breaking free and sliding down her face. The lifeguard fell back onto the grass, shaking his head, laughing with disbelief. "Holy crap! We did it!" But amid all the celebration, it was Ella who moved first. She stepped forward slowly, as if not to scare the miracle. Her tiny shoes squished in the wet earth. She knelt beside the dog and gently placed her hand on his paw. Her palm barely covered it, her fingers brushing against damp fur. The dog didn't flinch. He didn't move. But his eye, just one, fluttered open. Though clouded, but open. Ella leaned down close, her nose nearly touching his. "Hi," she whispered. "You're okay now." And somehow, in that moment, no one dared speak. Grown men wiped their eyes. A young mother pulled her toddler closer. Someone recorded it quietly, their phone trembling in their hand. But Ella didn't care who watched. For her, this wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a heroic act. It was magic, quiet, powerful magic, the kind only a child could truly believe in. And she believed, with all her heart. The dog let out a slow, shuddering breath and, with effort, turned his head slightly toward her. It was all he could do, but it was enough. She smiled, wide and full of relief. "You came back," she said simply, as if he had just been away for a little while. A few moments later, animal control arrived, sirens low, emergency lights off. A vet tech gently approached with a stretcher and thermal blankets. They checked vitals, nodded solemnly, and loaded the dog carefully into the van. "He's critical," the tech explained to Olivia, "but he's got a shot now. You gave him that." "No," Olivia said softly, brushing a strand of wet hair from Ella's forehead. "She did." As the van doors closed and the dog was taken away, Ella pressed her palm to the glass. The shepherd, barely conscious, flicked his ear once. Just once. She beamed like it was the greatest gift in the world. When the van pulled away, the crowd began to disperse. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds again, casting a soft glow across the lake. Parents resumed their picnics. Kids slowly returned to their games, but something had shifted. The air felt different, lighter, like the world had been reset by something extraordinary. That night, at home, Olivia tucked Ella into bed. She brought her warm milk and sat beside her as the little girl clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly. "Is he safe now?" Ella asked. Olivia smiled. "He's safe. He's warm. And he's got people taking care of him." Ella nodded once, satisfied. "He just needed someone to see him," she whispered, eyes already closing. And as Olivia watched her daughter drift to sleep, she realized that her child, her sweet, curious, brave child, had not only saved a dog from drowning, she had taught a whole crowd what it meant to truly see, to truly act, to believe in something fragile and fight for it anyway. The next morning came slowly, soaked in the gray stillness that often follows chaos. Olivia hadn't slept much, not really. Even with Ella tucked in and dreaming, and the comforting silence of home wrapped around her, her mind kept replaying the day before. The water. That moment the dog coughed out life. Over and over, like a movie she couldn't pause. When dawn broke through the curtains, Olivia had already packed a towel, a thermos of warm broth, and a blanket in the back seat of her car. They didn't wait. Ella was up early too, as if her body remembered that something important still hung in the balance. She didn't ask questions. She didn't fuss. She just got dressed, grabbed her favorite stuffed bunny, and climbed into her booster seat with a quiet kind of determination that Olivia couldn't quite describe. The kind that came from a child who had seen something sacred and wanted to protect it. At the Animal Trauma Center, the dog was still alive, barely. He lay in a heated crate, bandaged and sedated, his breathing shallow but steady. When Ella stepped into the room, he stirred. His ears didn't perk, but one of his paws shifted slightly toward the sound of her voice. "Good boy," she whispered, her tiny hand pressing gently to the side of the crate. "We're here now." After a few more hours of stabilizing care, he was cleared for transfer. The staff offered their gratitude, their well wishes, but they made it clear this dog needed long-term care, and the trauma center wasn't built for that. He should be placed with a shelter, the vet said kindly. Somewhere that can monitor him. Somewhere with space. So Olivia drove straight to the local shelter, with Ella in tow and the dog, wrapped in a soft quilt, lying in the back seat, too weak to stand. It was a modest place on the edge of town, tucked behind a chain-link fence and shaded by old pine trees. A wooden sign swung in the breeze, Lakeside Animal Haven. The woman at the front desk smiled at first, until Olivia explained the situation. Then the smile faded. No ID tag? No microchip. Olivia shook her head. Nothing. Not even a collar. The woman sighed. "We're at full capacity, and we've had a surge in surrenders this month. Honestly, I don't know where we'd even put him." "I'll pay," Olivia said quickly, "for his food, for his care, whatever it takes." The woman gave her a look, the kind that said she'd heard this before. "That's generous, really. But it's not just about money. This dog, he's old, injured, severely traumatized. He doesn't have any health history, no behavioral background, no guarantee he's adoptable." Ella was listening from the waiting bench. She stood now, walked slowly over to the desk, and held up a drawing, one she'd made that morning in the car. It was of her, the dog, and the lake. In crayon, she had scribbled "RIVR" at the top. The woman looked at it and smiled, sadly. Olivia's voice cracked. "Are you saying you won't take him?" The woman hesitated. Then came the final blow. The county has protocols. In cases like this, when the dog has no records, no ID, and medical complications, euthanasia is the standard recommendation, especially if no foster or adopter steps forward. "No," Olivia said immediately, shaking her head. "You're not putting him down." "I'm sorry." "No, you're not," Olivia snapped, her voice rising. "You didn't see him fighting to stay alive. You didn't see my daughter scream for him. You didn't pull him from the lake." The room fell quiet. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic clicking of a fan overhead. Then Ella spoke, softly, but with all the weight her small voice could carry. "He's not nobody. He's mine." The woman behind the desk blinked, stunned. Olivia took a deep breath. "We'll take him," she said firmly. "We'll figure it out." They left without another word. Back in the car, the air was thick with quiet fury and something else, resolve. Olivia looked at the dog in the rearview mirror, still wrapped in the quilt, still silent. He hadn't made a sound since they'd carried him into the vet clinic the day before. Not even a whimper. When they got home, Olivia laid him on the porch, too fragile to move further inside. She set up a space with blankets and a heater and tucked Ella's drawing next to him. As she sat down beside his still body, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake, a small hand slipped into hers. "He needs a name," Ella said gently. Olivia looked at her daughter. "You want to name him?" Ella nodded, eyes fixed on the dog. "River." Olivia tilted her head. "Why River?" "Because he came from the water," Ella whispered, as if it were obvious. "But now he's safe on the land." And just like that, it felt right. as if naming him was the first thread in sewing together something broken. River. Not the drowning dog. Not a lost cause. Not too old or too hurt. Just River, a survivor with a name and a place to belong. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the porch, River stirred. His legs trembled. His head tilted slightly. He tried, and failed, to lift himself, but his eyes opened fully for the first time. He looked at Olivia, then at Ella, then let out the faintest sound, a wheeze that might have once been a sigh. Ella reached for his paw and whispered, "You're home now." River hadn't moved in days. He lay on the porch like a forgotten coat, barely breathing, his eyes half closed, lost in some invisible fog of pain and memory. Olivia tried everything: warm broth, scrambled eggs, hand-fed pieces of chicken, but nothing tempted him. The bowls would sit beside him, untouched, the steam curling into the air and disappearing just like his will to live. The porch, once a place of quiet mornings and sunlit afternoons, had turned into a place of waiting. Waiting for him to give in. Waiting for him to decide whether he wanted to stay in this world or slip quietly out of it. She had already called the vet twice. The answer was the same each time. Some dogs recover physically, but not all of them come back in their hearts. Sometimes, it's not the wounds you can see that hold them down. It's what they remember. That thought stayed with her as she watched River, a dog whose body had been pulled from drowning, but whose spirit still seemed to be sinking beneath the surface. Ella, in her quiet way, never stopped believing. Every evening after her nap, she would step outside in her mismatched socks, clutching her plastic recorder, a tiny, bright red toy she adored. She never made a fuss. She just sat cross-legged beside River, the toy in her lap, and hummed. Not a song with words, just a sound, soft, slow, a lullaby without a name, like a secret being shared between two beings who had no language in common but still understood each other completely. The first time it happened, Olivia almost missed it. River's leg twitched, just slightly, like a dream had stirred beneath his stillness. But the second time, she saw his ear flick toward Ella's voice. Ella noticed too. She leaned forward, not saying anything, just brushing her fingers lightly against his shoulder and continuing to hum as if nothing magical had happened. But something had. Something undeniable. That night, Olivia found River's water bowl disturbed. Not empty, but not full either. A few tiny droplets had spilled on the floorboards. And beside the food bowl, a tiny indent, as if someone had nudged it ever so slightly. Her heart jumped. He had moved. It wasn't much, but it meant something. He was still in there, somewhere beneath the weight of whatever pain he was carrying. The next day, Ella came out with a picture book. It was her favorite, the one about the lion who gets lost and finds a friend in a little girl. She sat beside River and began reading, pointing to the pictures and showing him each page. Her words tumbled over themselves, half-formed, childlike, but full of feeling. River didn't lift his head, but his eyes, both of them now, remained open. Watching her. Listening. That night, when Olivia brought out his food again, she noticed something else. A few licks had been taken, just enough to leave a small crater in the center of the dish. By the third day, something had shifted. River still didn't bark, still didn't stand. But when Ella approached, his tail moved, not wagging, not exactly, more like a whisper of a response, a muscle remembering what hope felt like. Olivia didn't say anything. She didn't want to break the moment, but she knew now, without a doubt, that River wasn't fading anymore. He was waiting. Waiting for this little girl with her music and her stories and her innocent patience to pull him the rest of the way back. And then came the moment that sealed it. It was dusk. Ella had wrapped herself in her blanket and lay beside River, singing her lullaby one more time, her recorder resting beside her like a guardian. The air was cool, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. Olivia stood at the door, watching with her hand pressed to her chest. Then, from River's throat, came a sound. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't even a whine. It was something softer, a low, broken hum that barely lifted into the air. But it was his. A sound born from somewhere deep inside him. The first true sign that he was still here, still choosing to stay. And just like that, Olivia knew. River wasn't lost anymore. He was just on his way home. And Ella, her tiny songs, her patient stories, her wordless warmth, had shown him the way. River had survived the lake. He had made it through the silence, the hunger, the stillness that nearly took him. But survival was only the beginning. The vet appointment was meant to be routine, a checkup to assess his recovery, his wounds, and maybe even a timeline for when he could start going on short walks again. Olivia sat with Ella in the corner of the sterile, softly humming exam room while River rested on the floor beside them, his breathing steady but guarded. He didn't whine. He didn't resist. But his eyes followed every movement the vet made, the kind of stare that didn't come from curiosity, but memory. The doctor, a kind man with silver-framed glasses and a quiet way of speaking, began his examination gently. At first, the findings were expected: muscle fatigue, mild dehydration, bruised ribs still mending from the struggle in the water. But then his hands paused at River's side. This isn't new," he murmured. He turned toward Olivia, concern deepening in his face. "These are old burn scars. Heat exposure. Likely chemical." He lifted River's paw and pointed to the pads, dry, cracked, with darkened spots that hadn't healed right. "And this here? That's from walking on unsafe surfaces. For days. Maybe weeks." Olivia couldn't breathe for a moment. She looked at Ella, who sat on the little bench, feet dangling, holding her stuffed bunny tight. The vet wasn't finished. As he gently scanned River's neck for an identification chip, nothing registered. He checked again. Still nothing. "It looks like it was removed," he said quietly. "Surgically. That's not something a stray does. Someone didn't just lose this dog, someone tried to erase him." The room felt colder. Olivia looked down at River. He was staring into the wall, unmoving as if he already knew all of this, and had simply stopped hoping anyone else would care. Olivia reached out and ran her hand along his back, trying to keep herself steady. "How could anyone do this?" she whispered. The vet didn't answer. Sometimes there were no words. That evening, back at home, Olivia made River's bed extra soft and turned off the hallway lights so he could rest without harsh shadows. Ella sat beside him, gently tracing pictures in her storybook with her tiny fingers. The house was quiet, peaceful. But then, as Olivia flipped on the television in the next room to check the evening news, a man's voice shouted through the speakers. It was nothing dramatic, just a debate segment, two anchors arguing over politics, but it was enough. River bolted upright. His body stiffened. Then he scrambled across the wooden floor, knocking over the water bowl, and wedged himself under the side table in the corner, trembling violently. His breath came in short bursts. His ears pinned back flat. He looked like he was back in the water again, or worse, like he wasn't in this house at all, but trapped somewhere dark and full of fists. Ella didn't speak. She closed her book, slid off the rug, and crawled toward him slowly. She didn't try to pull him out or force him to come to her. She simply sat nearby, folded her hands, and whispered, "No more bad." She said it again. "No more bad." Her voice was as small as her hands, but steady, sure, like she was casting a spell over the shadows. Slowly, River stopped shaking. His breath slowed. His eyes moved toward her, softening. Olivia turned off the TV. Her heart ached in a way she didn't expect. River wasn't just healing from drowning, he was healing from everything that came before. And that recovery wouldn't be measured in days or doses. It would be counted in moments like this. In every second he didn't flinch, in every minute he trusted someone not to hurt him. That night, as Olivia tucked Ella into bed, the little girl looked up at her with serious eyes. "He remembers the bad," she said softly. Olivia nodded. "I think he does." Ella hugged her bunny close. "But now he's mine, and I'll give him new remembers." Downstairs, River lay by the fireplace, his head resting on the quilt Olivia had spread just for him. His eyes were open but calm. For the first time, he didn't sleep curled in a tight ball. He stretched out just slightly, not in full trust yet, but in the direction of it. And outside, beyond the glass door, the moon rose slowly, pouring light over the yard. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase what had been done. But it illuminated something new, a beginning. The story spread faster than Olivia ever imagined. At first, it was just murmurs between neighbors, a few casual comments at the grocery store, and wide-eyed glances from people walking past her porch. But then someone posted a photo online, a blurry picture of little Ella crouched beside River, wrapped in that old checkered blanket, her hand resting on his head like they had always belonged to each other. The caption was simple: "She saved him when no one else noticed." It caught fire. By morning, local reporters were calling. The news station arrived 2 days later, setting up tripods near the lake, asking Olivia to stand on the exact patch of grass where it had all happened. Ella didn't say much during the interview. She stood beside Olivia in her overalls and pink sneakers, holding her stuffed bunny in one hand and River's leash in the other. The anchor leaned down with a smile and asked, "Why did you go toward the water, sweetie?" Ella looked up, squinting at the camera, and simply said, "Because he was crying." That sentence, 5 words, soft and unpolished, became the headline on nearly every article the next day. Because he was crying. It was a child's truth, pure, unfiltered, and it hit people harder than they expected. But not everyone responded with kindness. Within a week, Olivia began noticing the divide. Some people approached them with gratitude, handing her handwritten notes, dog treats, or even gift cards with trembling thanks. Others weren't so gentle. "What kind of mother lets a toddler wander near a lake?" one woman muttered behind her at the pharmacy. "Lucky that dog didn't bite her," a man grumbled at the gas station. Even online, people were split, half calling Ella a miracle, the other half accusing Olivia of irresponsibility. At first, Olivia tried not to listen. But doubt has a way of whispering, even when the world shouts praise. She replayed the moment in her head too many times. The scream, the sprint, the water. What if she'd been slower? What if Ella had stepped into the water herself? What if? But the letters changed everything. They began arriving slowly, 1 or 2 each day. Envelopes with unfamiliar names, strange postmarks, shaky handwriting. Most began the same way: "I don't usually write to strangers," and ended with something raw, something honest. One woman described a stray she'd rescued from a highway ditch. A man from another state wrote about the dog he lost as a boy, and how Ella's story helped him remember something beautiful. A teenager mailed a drawing of River with angel wings, scribbled in blue marker and glitter glue. Olivia sat on the floor of their living room every evening, reading the letters aloud to Ella while River lay by the fireplace, his eyes flickering open at the sound of her voice. Sometimes Olivia cried while reading. Sometimes Ella laughed. Sometimes they both just sat quietly, letting the words fill the space where fear had once lived. And then the news feature aired. "The Girl Who Heard What We Ignored." That was the title the station chose. The segment was just 5 minutes long, but it painted the whole story: the crowded lake, the silent splash, the mother who dove, the dog who nearly died, and the little girl who noticed what dozens of adults did not. They didn't dramatize it. They didn't edit Ella's words. They let her voice, soft and simple, carry the weight of the truth. "I heard him. That's all." The broadcast ended with footage of River limping gently behind her in the park, sunlight catching on his fur as he stayed close to her heels like a shadow learning to trust the light. That night, Olivia's inbox overflowed. More letters, messages, voicemails from strangers choking back tears. One woman, a retired nurse, said, "I've worked with trauma victims my whole life, human and animal. That little girl has something rare. She listens with her heart." River's food bowl was empty that evening. He ate without being asked. He even barked, once, when a bird landed too close to Ella's chalk drawings on the patio. It wasn't loud, but it was real. His voice was returning, piece by piece. The town may have been divided, but Olivia knew this much: she wasn't. She had watched a child notice what grown-ups missed. She had seen how love could rise from silence. And in the quietest moment of the longest day, she heard Ella whisper to River while tucking a small blanket around him, "You don't have to cry anymore. I heard you." And now, the world did too. The days grew longer. The sun hung a little lower in the sky each afternoon, and the air began to hum with that golden stillness that only exists when life is slowly returning to normal. In Olivia's home, normal wasn't what it used to be. It was softer now, shaped by recovery, marked by little routines that wrapped themselves around River like warmth. He no longer slept curled into himself, no longer flinched at every door creak or sudden movement. He'd taken to lying in the sun-drenched square of the living room, just close enough to Ella to feel her presence, but far enough to still pretend he chose solitude. Ella spent her afternoons at the small pond just down the road, where the grass met water in quiet ripples. She had a toy boat, bright red with a chipped sail, that she called Captain Wolf. It was a gift from her grandfather, and every day she brought it to sail across the shallows, her little fingers pushing it gently into the water, her eyes wide with stories only she could see. River always followed, not with the enthusiasm of a playful puppy, but with the slow, steady commitment of a guardian. He would sit at the edge, ears perked, eyes watching, as if every leaf, every insect, every distant rustle of wind needed his approval before it reached her. It was one of those peaceful afternoons when the air smelled like cut grass and the trees whispered only to themselves. Ella was kneeling at the pond, her boat bobbing on the surface, singing something under her breath. River sat just behind her, calm, patient, breathing deeply like a dog finally beginning to trust the world again. Olivia stood a little farther back, holding a thermos of coffee, grateful for the quiet. Then it happened. A duck, bold and loud, burst from the reeds just feet away from Ella. It flapped once, letting out a harsh, unexpected quack that echoed off the water. Ella startled backward, letting out a surprised yelp and falling onto her hands. Her boat spun and drifted sideways. And River moved. Not just turned his head or shifted his weight, he leapt to his feet, muscles tense, his eyes locked on the duck. And then, from somewhere deep in his chest, came a growl. It wasn't threatening, it was protective. The kind of sound a dog makes when he remembers who he is. And then, before anyone could say anything, he barked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fierce. But it was sharp, alive, unmistakable, a sound pulled up from silence, shaped by instinct, polished by love. Olivia froze. Her hands tightened around the thermos. She hadn't heard River bark since the day he was pulled from the lake. In fact, he hadn't made a sound beyond a few soft whimpers in his sleep. But now, here he was, standing tall, alert and vocal. His voice had returned, and he had used it for her daughter. Ella, unfazed by the duck or the splash or even the fall, looked up at River with awe. "Good boy," she whispered, brushing grass from her knees. River immediately lowered his head, tail wagging once in that quiet, slow rhythm he developed with her, a language of motion, not noise. Olivia walked slowly toward them, blinking back the tears she didn't expect. She knelt beside River, placing her hand gently on his back. He didn't flinch. In fact, he leaned into her. She looked at Ella, whose smile was as wide as the sky, and then at the boat, now calmly floating back toward the shore. The moment felt like magic, not loud or sparkling, but the kind of magic that lives in small moments that mean everything. Later that evening, back at home, River paced a little before dinner, something new. He sniffed his bowl, waited until Ella sat down beside him, and then ate every last bite. When Olivia turned on the TV to check the weather, he didn't bolt. He only looked once, then lay back down, curling into a soft stretch beside the window. They sat together that night on the porch, all three of them, wrapped in blankets as the sky turned lavender with dusk. Olivia spoke softly about the day, about the bark, about how proud she was of both of them. Ella leaned against River's side, her eyes already drifting shut. River kept his gaze on the darkening trees, his ears still alert, but his body relaxed, like he'd finally chosen this place as his own. That bark had been more than just a sound. It was a declaration, a reclaiming of self, a promise. He wasn't silent anymore. He was home. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the knock came. Olivia wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries, no appointments, just another slow, steady day of healing. River had taken to napping under the front porch again, though now it was by choice, not fear. Ella was painting chalk suns on the driveway, her humming mixing with the light breeze. The knock was firm, but not urgent, the kind of knock that came from someone who wasn't in a rush, but had something to say. Olivia opened the door to find an older man standing on the porch. He wore a faded denim jacket and a battered cap that had once been navy but was now the color of sea fog. His face was sun-worn, deeply lined, the kind of face that carried stories even when his mouth was closed. He held a folded newspaper in one hand and in the other a photograph, creased at the corners, yellowed with time. "Sorry to drop in," he said, voice slow and gravelly, "but that your dog?" He held up the photo. Olivia's breath caught. It was River, or at least a younger version of him, ears perked, tail high, standing at the edge of a wooden dock with water glinting behind him. His fur looked thicker, his body stronger. But the eyes, they were the same. She glanced down at River, who had quietly wandered up beside her and was now staring at the man, alert, still. "I saw the news," the man said, unfolding the paper and tapping the picture of Ella and River beneath the headline. "Knew I'd seen that dog before. Used to guard the Eastwood Marina. Belonged to the dockmaster there, old Roy." He looked at River again. "We called him Boone back then." Olivia stepped aside, invited the man in. They sat in the front room while Ella played outside, unaware that another piece of River's story was unfolding just inside the walls of her home. The man introduced himself as Walter. He explained that he'd worked at the marina for decades, fueling boats, checking lines, doing repairs. "That dog," he said, nodding at River, "was the smartest of the lot. Trained to alert us when anyone got too close to the fuel docks. Knew every regular by name. But then," he trailed off, sighing, "last fall, some illegal races started happening after hours. Loud, dangerous stuff. Roy tried to stop it, got into a fight with one of the racers. Boone got in between them. After that night, the dog disappeared. We thought he ran off scared, but maybe he didn't run at all." Olivia felt the chill settle in the room. River sat perfectly still, watching Walter without blinking. Not fearful, just remembering. Walter placed the photo on the coffee table and looked at Olivia. "If that's him, and I'd bet my boat it is, then someone didn't just leave him behind. Someone made him disappear. She knew what she had to do. That evening, after dinner, while Ella colored quietly in the living room and River rested at her feet, Olivia called the authorities. Not animal control, this time the county sheriff's office. She explained what Walter had told her, sent a scan of the photo, even offered River's old collar, which Walter had somehow kept tucked in a box all this time. The deputy listened carefully. "We've been keeping an eye on those races," he said. "But this gives us something solid. We'll look into it." For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt something different settle over the house. Not fear, not grief, something sharper. Justice. A chance to trace back the pain and maybe stop it from happening again. Later that night, as Olivia tucked Ella into bed, the little girl asked her something unexpected. "Mommy, did River have a name before?" Olivia nodded. "Just Boone." Ella thought about it, then shook her head. "That's not his name now. He's River. 'Cause he came from the water. 'Cause I found him." Olivia smiled and kissed her forehead. "That's right. You gave him a new name. A better one." Downstairs, River lay by the open window, a soft breeze ruffling his ears. His eyes drifted closed, but there was no twitching, no low growls from forgotten memories. Just sleep. And somewhere, in that quiet place where memory and safety finally meet, maybe he dreamed of water, not the drowning kind, but the peaceful kind, the kind that carries you home. It was a crisp Saturday morning when the invitation arrived. A pale blue envelope tucked neatly into the mailbox, sealed with a gold foil stamp from the mayor's office. Olivia opened it cautiously, expecting maybe a formal thank you or a local newsletter. But inside was something else entirely. A handwritten card, carefully penned, read, "In recognition of extraordinary compassion and courage, we invite Ella and River to attend a community celebration this Sunday at Lakeside Park. A small honor for a very big miracle." Olivia read it twice, then called Ella over. The little girl didn't say much, just stared at the card, then at River, who was sprawled across the rug like a prince in his castle. "We're going back to the water," she whispered, mostly to him. Word had already spread across the small lakeside town. People knew the story now, not just the facts, but the feeling of it. The little girl who heard the splash no one else noticed. The mother who dove without thinking. The dog who came back from the brink. It had become something more than news. It had become a story people told their children before bedtime. A reminder that miracles don't always come loud and shining. Sometimes they come quietly, with a whimper and a child's hand reaching through silence. The day of the event, Lakeside Park shimmered with sunlight. Balloons swayed gently in the breeze. A few folding chairs had been set up near the old fishing dock, and a crowd of locals milled about, chatting and sipping lemonade. But the real center of attention was River. Cleaned up now, his coat shiny, eyes bright, moving with just a hint of limp that somehow made him more dignified than broken. He wore a simple blue bandana around his neck, stitched with the words, "I was heard." Ella held his leash proudly, though River barely needed guiding anymore. He stuck by her side like they were tethered by something stronger than rope, something invisible and unbreakable. The mayor, a silver-haired man in a gray vest and kind eyes, stepped up to the microphone. He didn't speak long. He didn't need to. "Sometimes," he said, glancing at Ella and River, "the smallest among us see the biggest things. They notice what we miss. They act when we hesitate, and in doing so, they change the world around them." With that, he gestured toward the edge of the dock, where a wooden plaque had been mounted into the railing. The crowd turned. Ella stepped forward, her tiny hand gripping River's fur. Together they approached. The plaque was simple, elegant. Ella's watch. She heard what others ignored. He lived because of love. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was reverent. full of hearts beating slower, eyes blinking back emotion, people remembering how easy it is to look away, and how powerful it is to listen instead. Children gathered around River like he was a mythical creature. Some brought treats, others just wanted to touch his ears or lean against his side. River wagged his tail, not wildly but gently, with calm assurance, as if he understood the honor in their touch. He didn't flinch. He didn't tremble. He stood still, regal, steady, like a survivor finally being seen for more than just his scars. Olivia stood off to the side, arms folded across her chest, heart full. She watched as Ella knelt by the plaque, tracing the letters with her finger. She didn't read yet, not all the words anyway, but she knew what they meant. She felt them. She lived them. Later that afternoon, long after the crowd had thinned and the lemonade table had been packed away, Ella sat at the edge of the dock, her legs dangling above the water. River lay beside her, head resting on her lap, eyes closed but ears twitching at every splash and breeze. "Do you remember?" she whispered, not needing an answer. "It was right here." River didn't move, but his tail thumped once against the wood. Olivia took a photo, not for social media, not for the news, just for herself. A memory. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful heroes are the ones who say nothing at all. Who simply stay. Who simply hear. Who simply love. And who are, in turn, loved back, fully, fiercely, forever. The lake looked different now. It wasn't just a place where something had once gone wrong. It had become something sacred. A soft-spoken witness to a moment when the world paused, listened, and chose kindness. On the surface, it was still just water, reflecting clouds, dancing with breeze, flickering silver where the sun touched it. But for those who remembered, it was something far greater. It was where a little girl heard what others ignored, where a dog was pulled back from silence, where love had proved louder than fear. It had been exactly 1 year. Ella sat cross-legged on a faded quilt, a small easel propped in front of her and a set of watercolor paints neatly laid out beside her tiny bare feet. Her brush dipped and moved carefully, leaving soft strokes of blue and gold on the page. She was painting the lake, not as it looked exactly, but as she remembered it. Brighter, fuller, as if the water itself had learned how to shine. Beside her, curled up in a perfect crescent of comfort, lay River. His breathing was slow and steady, the deep, rhythmic kind that spoke of peace. One ear twitched now and then at the buzz of a fly, but otherwise he didn't stir. His eyes were closed, but not out of fear, not from pain or exhaustion. Just rest, true rest. The kind only felt in the presence of home. A friend from the neighborhood, a girl Ella had met at the park, sat nearby, watching her paint. "He doesn't bark much," she said quietly, brushing hair from her face. Ella smiled and dipped her brush again. "He used to be scared of the water," she said, glancing up. "Now he watches it like it's his friend." The girl nodded, unsure what to say, but sensing there was something special in the stillness around them, a sort of invisible magic that wrapped around the child and her dog like sunlight through leaves. River's tail tapped once against the quilt. His ears perked for just a moment, recognizing the sound of Ella's voice. Then, with a contented sigh, he rested his head gently against her foot and went still again. He didn't need to be alert anymore. He didn't need to brace for loud noises or strangers or dark water. He had heard his name in a child's laugh. He had felt the warmth of arms that held without hurting. He had found a place that didn't ask him to survive, just to live. Olivia sat a little distance away, sipping tea from a thermos, watching them both. She'd stopped trying to take photos months ago. Some things weren't meant to be frozen in frames. They were meant to unfold in quiet, fleeting beauty, over and over, in moments that refused to be captured. She'd learned that the hard way, trying to hold on too tightly to things that were always meant to pass through like water through fingers. But this she could watch forever. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the reeds along the shore. A duck quacked somewhere across the water, and a boat's wake sent gentle ripples to the dock. River opened one eye, just long enough to scan the scene, and then closed it again with full confidence. The lake no longer meant danger. It was just water now. And water, like time, like pain, like stories, could change. Nearby, the plaque still gleamed beneath the dock's edge. Ella's watch. People came to see it sometimes, to read the short line etched into wood. She heard what others ignored. He lived because of love. Some even cried. Most just stood quietly, as if stepping into a sacred space. A local artist had painted a mural just beyond the path, a swirl of blues and greens, with a girl and a dog nestled into the middle of it, surrounded by waves. The mayor's office had offered to add security lighting, but Olivia had declined. "Let it glow in daylight," she'd said. That's when the miracle happened. River stirred as Ella dipped her brush again. This time, she used a little bit of gold. She said it made the lake look warm. When she was done, she didn't sign it with her name, she just painted a small paw print in the corner. Olivia would frame it later. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. As the sun began to set, casting the water in shades of tangerine and rose, Ella leaned back on her hands and looked out over the lake. "He's not scared anymore," she said softly, mostly to herself. "No," Olivia said, standing beside her now. "He's not." River lifted his head one last time before sleep. He looked at them both, eyes full of something more than sight, something like memory. Then, with a final stretch and a deep breath, he laid back down beside the girl who saved him, listening not for danger, but simply for the sound of her voice. Where fear had once lived, peace had taken root. And in the place where a splash had gone unheard by so many, a whisper had changed everything. River was home. And the water, it didn't just shine. It remembered. The most powerful connections are often the ones we can't explain. If you felt moved by today's story, share your thoughts below. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of the world.